Hello, my name is Timothy Tripp. I am the Vice President of Engineering and Construction Planning at Duke Energy Corporation. I majored in electrical engineering. I have a Bachelor of Science in Electrical Engineering from the University of Notre Dame. So nuclear power plants have multiple safety systems. They call it redundancy. That means if one system fails, they have backup systems. So the biggest thing in a nuclear plant is keeping water pumping into controlling and cooling the core. There actually is no fuel to feed that makes a fire or anything. It's basically cooling and keeping control of the core so that it doesn't melt the core and get out of control. So the safety systems are all about pumping water to keep the cooling controlled in a nuclear power plant. Nuclear power plants are inspected continuously. They have constant monitoring systems. Every 18 or 24 months, the fuel assemblies are actually inspected and fuel bundles are replaced. It's called the refueling part of a nuclear power plant. So every 18-12 months, refueling happens, and any systems that need to be upgraded are upgraded at that time, and any maintenance that need to be done is done at that time. But during the normal operation of a nuclear power plant, you basically just have monitoring systems to make sure everything's in line. So the maintenance happens on a cyclical basis. Nuclear power plants, again, there are multiple values in a nuclear power plant. They don't create any hydrocarbons or any ozone depleting gases like a fossil fuel, being natural gas or coal or anything else that burns and outgasses into the atmosphere. All of the nuclear reactions are in containment vessels. Those containment vessels are meant to basically contain any type of event that might cause, that could potentially cause a problem. In the case of the Fukushima power plant in Japan, there were two events that occurred which caused a problem, which was basically an earthquake which damaged or basically stopped off-site power, so that when the power plant had to be shut down because of the earthquake, there was no off-site power to continue providing power to the pumps. But the biggest thing was the diesels did kick in, the emergency diesels kicked in as they were supposed to. The tsunami came after that and basically flooded the diesels. So the diesels is the first emergency power that was there, and the off-site power was the second. So the two events, the earthquake and then the tsunami, are what wasn't predicted to happen at the same time. There were no safety measures or redundancy for that. Since that time, all nuclear power plants worldwide have the ability to deal with multiple event catastrophes, and they have backup systems to deal with multiple event catastrophes. So the public has basically been, those events of Fukushima, although drastic, caused the redundancy systems and the safety system of a nuclear power plant to be improved to protect the public. So the way electricity is generated in a nuclear power plant as well as a coal or a gas power plant is you need to create steam, and that steam then is directed to a turbine. The steam turns the turbine. The turbine has a generator on the end of the turbine that basically turns the actual internal parts of the generator, which creates an electric field that generates electricity. So all power plants work that way. Gas basically does it by creating a fireball. That fireball then there's a boiler inside of the actual fire box. It heats the water there, creates the steam, and then it's pumped into, and then it's actually directed to the turbine. Coal does the same thing. It creates a fireball, burns coal, heats the water, creates steam, and it creates. Now, with a nuclear power plant, what you do is you basically take an unstable atom, which is uranium. You basically cause it to be unstable, which when it releases electrons creates heat. Releasing those electrons heats up the water, and that water then becomes steam. So the only difference between a nuclear power plant and a fossil fuel base, being coal or gas, is that the heat is generated using a chemical or nuclear reaction versus burning fossil fuel. But the same thing happens. Steam is created. It turns a turbine, which is a giant fan. So when you put steam through it, it makes that turbine turn, and it creates electricity through a generator. Yes, they are. Nuclear power plants are typically more expensive. So one thing I did mention earlier was that with a coal or a gas, you're basically feeding fuel to that plant. Meaning you have to, in a case of a coal plant, they bring in on trains, train loads full of coal. That coal then is burned, and then the ash has to be put somewhere. You might have heard stories in the news about ash ponds. Well, gas actually is piped in, but it continually needs to be fed natural gas. Now, granted, they found new sources of natural gas, but over time, there still is an expense with constantly fueling. The reason why nuclear power plants are more expensive is you have to protect the core. That, as I said, there's a unstable nuclear reaction that happens that creates that heat. Well, you basically have to contain that reaction in a safety case. You have to have vessels around the reaction to make sure it doesn't, so you don't have nuclear waste or nuclear reactions outside of the control area you want. That requires extra safety measures, extra robust containment vessels, and other types of things to make sure that you keep the public safe. There also has to be security around that too. Today, you've heard of things regarding terrorists. Well, terrorists would love to get access to some of the material in a nuclear power plant because they believe they could create what they call dirty bombs and all kinds of other things with that material. So there are extra security measures that have to be put around a nuclear power plant to protect those materials that we would not want to get into the hands of people who should not have them. Efficiency is all based upon what, so if you say cost efficiency, once a nuclear power plant is built, it runs much more cost efficiently than a plant that requires constant fuel. Because once it's there, as I said earlier, you only have to refuel it every 18 or 24 months. The fuel assemblies themselves are nowhere near as expensive as the fuel required to run a coal or gas power plant over the equivalent time period. So yes, cost efficiency, once built and once in operation, a nuclear power plant is more efficient and more safe to the environment than a coal or gas fired plant.